Herkese merhaba. Bugün MARUF'un üçüncü ve
Today is the third and final session of MARUF. We are together for this. We have esteemed speakers in the morning from different geographies. I am going to introduce them to you, but our session will cover the post-COVID economy, and we will talk about our cities together affecting the whole world. The COVID-19 crisis will be considered with different aspects in terms of planning and city. My guests are extremely esteemed people in their own fields. We are happy to host them here. On the other hand, before we start, I would like to thank all the technical team and the organization committee for giving us this opportunity. The idea mother to Gülden, I would like to thank her. She started this topic and gave us the opportunity to discuss it, and also gave me this important task, which is, I would also like to thank her for her trust in me. Our first speaker is Seher Alacacı Arınar. Madam Seher is the assistant representative responsible of programs in the UN system in different posts, and throughout her career in the UN, suited to the membership conditions of membership to the European Union, which is the sustainable development purposes of the UN, headed by the political integration, innovation, and financing. She is doing the leadership. She is working on the Southeast development projects on the field, and she's a development practitioner. She's worked on areas of management and project implementation and research. She has spent 15 years, she has this experience in development work. She is also working on the UN's human rights. She's an active participant. She's graduated from Bilkent University, public management branch. I'm going to give the microphone to her. She has 20 minutes. Please go ahead, Seher Hanım. Thank you very much, Yiğit Bey. On behalf of the UNDP, I would like to sincerely salute everyone, and I would like to thank the MARUF team for inviting me as a panelist. Our topic today is cities, economy, and COVID-19. As it is known, together with the COVID-19 pandemic, the world has faced a tremendous challenge. When you look at 90% of these points, we see that there are people living in urban areas. This makes headquarters for COVID-19 in the cities. Because of the fact that cities are intense in population, there's thought that they may be reduced after the pandemic, and the research done, the settlement intensity will not have a physical sense. And when we look from another side, we see that cities are areas where ideas turn to science, and they will be present in the future of humanity. Doubtless, as in every big crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic had a serious effect on cities. It will place its own signature. When we look at the past, there are many areas which are identified with the cities. They entered our life with similar crises, water and sewage networks, parks, cholera, tuberculosis, and the plague. The lessons taken from previous ages had similar circumstances. After the COVID-19 pandemic, what will it promise us? What will be done from now on? And in order to make deductions in certain areas, it's a bit early, but during the pandemic, there will be a need for policies against inequalities. Cities should be more resilient, more encompassing, and should be more open to assessments. As in every crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic deepens inequalities and makes them more visible. What I shared earlier, the intensity of settlement is not effective in the spreading of diseases, but there are problems such as restricted access to health services and deficiencies in housing and the spreading of the pandemic. There is a correlation, it's possible to say. Under this condition, inequalities should be mapped in cities, started with housing, alternative transportation means to mass transit, and the internet infrastructure should be strengthened and supported to provide working from home. This will make the people more resistant in this framework, especially local governments are touching the citizens of the city. The increase of service capacity is greatly important. Quarantine and similar restrictions, especially the migrants, immigrants, and off-record workers are being struck asymmetrically. Their possibility of living are dried up, and the loosening of these restrictions can take place, but the risk to be subjected to disease is increased. When we look at inequalities, the post-pandemic, the dimension of sustainability is very important, we understand. In this area, especially the local development strategies are somehow a way for supporting. The consumption is a model in cities and rural areas, and this way supply chains are shortened and resistance will be increased. There is another possibility that the pandemic has caused. The pandemic strikes us, but also it brings opportunities. We have to turn these crises into opportunities. Another possibility is for cities to go into circular economies. I had mentioned at the start of my presentation, cities require capital, and there are places where resources are concentrated. In this way, the per capita resource usage is reduced. The cities can apply principles of circular economies, and the costs of consumption will be reduced. We have fit many projects and programs into these frameworks. All of our programs after the pandemic will be reshaped based on the effects of the pandemic. We had some work directly aimed at the COVID-19 pandemic. We had 3,000 plus SMEs. We increased their resistance through courses and training, and under temporary protection aimed at immigrants, we had a free working platform. Again, the pandemic makes vulnerable certain sectors. We developed sector reports. These are logistics, textiles, automotive, and machine industry. In this work, the vulnerable sectors, commercial activities will be supported, and the deficiencies to be prevented, and we ran market analyses. We work closely with development agencies and post-disaster policies and processes. We wanted to improve their capacity. We did this especially with resilience, adaptation, and preparation, readiness training, and aimed at vulnerable groups. We did some work for developing skills, especially focusing on youth. A short while ago, regarding the digitalization of SMEs, we started a new study with our development agencies. We took digitalization to our core, especially in the manufacturing and tourism sectors. We had met the operations requirements for digitalizations, and these determinations would be satisfied through a financial support program. Within a short while, we plan to bring this to life. We talk about the most important studies, especially connected to the subject of the panel, and the work that we will do special to the city. We will emphasize inequalities. When COVID-19 made more visible the inequalities, and some of them will be reshaped. I spoke a little while ago about local government's capacity to be increased. We are looking for projects and we are accelerating them. Vocational training centers would be created, and future jobs and new economy programs, taking the youth to the center. We wanted to increase their skills and their talents. In the same manner, local governments, especially in the economy of maintenance, I think it's important for them to gain competence. In the pandemic, in the crisis, the paid and unpaid maintenance works are connected. We tried to examine this. Both recollecting and the maintenance economy were taken amongst our priorities, and this way the repairs would be faster. The ex-convicts and handicapped groups, the social enterprise work was speeded, and finally applied by the UNDP, the local government reform program, and financial management systems were improved, and the prevention of wastes and providing services in accordance with EU norms. Since 2018, we applied this program, and thanks to this program, in the fight against COVID-19, the improvement of service standards was one of the most important focus points, especially public health, and service standards were, together with the participation of municipalities, they were improved and applied. And UNDP COVID-19 pandemic is, when you say sustainable development purposes, the roadmap was also created. It was a barrier, the pandemic, but this barrier could only be done with the localization of sustainable development purposes, especially our number 11 sustainable development purpose used to converting power of urbanization and development. All of the 16 purposes have a local dimension. There's a local action requirement. In the COVID-19 pandemic, these targets and these actions will be accelerated. It showed us this is required. I would like to show you a few statistical insights. The UN, according to UN estimates, the world population will in 10 years reach 8.6 billion, and 2050 will reach 9.6 billion. Approximately 60% of world population lives in cities in 2050. This will increase up to 80%. The Turkish population of 83 million, 75% lives in cities. Of the 81 provinces are metropolitan cities. 52% is living in the first 11 of the metropolitan areas. In other words, in the whole world, people are rapidly migrating to cities. According to the UN, in a decade, more than 10 million people will be living in the mega city. It will increase from 9 to 43. Cities are showing places of opportunity and hope where hard work will improve lives. But for the rapid urbanization to being resistance against crises such as COVID, if we can't provide the resistance, we can leave most of the humanity vulnerable against such crises. In this area, we are going to continue working, and with you and local governments, we are going to work very efficiently. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Sarah Hanım, we thank you very much. You've done a good job, and we were able to know about this work. I took some notes. You've touched upon some very good keywords. We are going to discuss them at the end one more time and lay them on the table. Now, in terms of time utilization, I would like to thank you concerning your sensitivity. It's going very well. Now, our second speaker is Professor Dr. Güven Sak.
In 1981, he was born in Bursa, and he has completed his undergrad at Middle East Technical University and completed his MS study in University of Anglia. He has completed his PhD in Middle East Technical University, and he is the chief researcher of the Capital Investment and also the Central Bank's Monetary Committee members, and also he is the professor at Ankara University. In 2003, he has become the professor. In 2006, he has been registered to Istanbul. He has left Ankara University and moved to Top University. And in 2004, he has been the founder, director of Turkish Economical Researches, and he has journals at Hürriyet Journal, also newspaper, at Tebam Research. He's the program director, and also he's the CEO of, actually, Tebam, Washington. I would like to leave the floor to Güven Bey to dig into the economical aspects of the issue. And the floor is yours, Professor. Okay, the floor is yours. If you have any presentation, you can upload it. I have presentation. I'm going to open it soon. Thank you very much, first of all, for this introduction. And it's a great happiness for me to be here today. COVID-19 process have taught us some certain lessons and have shown us that cities are very crucial. Seher Hanım drew us a map, a framework. When we are speaking about economy, it is as if we have passed to post-virus time. However, the problems are not over yet. And in the very beginning, it is essential to state that in the beginning of this business, I mean in February 2020, since 2020, February 2020, I have never fly, and I'm still not flying yet. So in February 2020, I have thought that it was a local event limited with China. Remember our perception at those times. When we were speaking about Turkish economy of those times, and when we were looking at analysis, I myself were telling that if China pays down, there may be some declines in raw material prices. Would it be good for Turkey or not? Was the main discussion of ours. And we were never thinking to come across with an incident. And let me share what was that incident. All of a sudden, we have come across with a situation when we are making assessments and evaluations about the process, we should not ignore the fact that we can come across with the same situation again. I'm going to point out 3 points within this framework. Let me summarize them. The first one is COVID-19 has been referred to Spanish flu 100 years ago, Spanish flu, but it was not like that in it. It was more comprehensive. Serhan has just emphasized. We are living in more urban-focused type of living structures. We are not living 100 years ago's habitus. And since the condition has changed and transformed, actually, the situation is not the same. And when we see the outcome and the recovery phase, we do have a very asymmetric movement. And poverty is increasing, inequalities are getting deeper. And all of the factors related with those conditions are having different recovery phases for each industry, each sector. And every region is having the impact in different ways and with different manners. And when we look at, without taking into consideration the local conditions, the local situations and local environments, it is not actually possible to have a holistic resilience creation for the city. So each city has got a different fashion, different trend. So we need to reconsider the topic, rethink the topic with a different perception, with a local perception. After COVID-19, if you call it a shock, we are passing from one shock to another. And the SDGs, okay, they're all fine, and the Green Deal and the Green Agenda. So when we are recovering from the virus, we do have some public actually spendings. And the climate change has taken as a hot topic in the agenda, but the same asymmetry will be present in this this transformation moment. I have just told you all of the present systems, I mean the food system, education system, health system, resilience against shocks is okay, but this is a lesson which we have taken out from COVID-19 as a lesson, but it has not been disseminated throughout time, and that local management, local administration, centralized government, decentralized government, and the service capacity and the monitoring of service capacity, how you are going to support and enhance and empower is all a matter of discussion. And let me underline some certain facts. First of all, in the very beginning, I have told you it is different from Spanish flu. 1918, the urbanization rate was only 19%. Now it is 56%. In 1918, the age of population was above the age of 65 was only 8%. Now it is at 16%. And then when we consider the virus environment, the fragile, the vulnerable group number is also increasing. We are living in massive environments, and we are also having aging populations. In 1918, the economical center of the world was in the Atlantic Ocean region, so it was only between Europe and United States. So there were condensed relationship, intense relations between those 2 continents. It shifted to Pacific side right now. Now it is in the Asian side, in the eastern part of the world. So we are so much interwoven, interrelated with each other, and we are so much actually depending each other. and the impacts of COVID-19 can be perceived in a better way. In the past, we were only looking at urbanization, and when we look at Germany and Turkey, there is a certain level of urbanization when we compare and contrast, and China is not at that level, but we are beyond 70% in urbanization, urbanized population. In the past, it was only the internal migration, and there was some actually increase in productivity rates, and we were thinking that, oh, that's all fine. But after this shock, we have seen that when we are organizing our life in cities, there are some new parameters which needs to be placed forward in this growing period, which UNDP is referring. The Human Development Index was a fixed source for us, and we were having a certain perception how to approach the economical growth, and we were only focusing on GDPs. Now UNDP have presented us a very important data. Growth is not directly actually related with the economical criteria, but also they have started to develop a metric, a scale, which is related with the harm, the pollution that we are creating in nature. And when we look at urbanization, the administrative infrastructure and the power of administrative infrastructure service capacity is making us to rethink for new metrics, for a new scale. Let me underline some certain issues once more. Yes, day by day, more population is moving towards cities and living there, and of course, the national income is being produced majorly in cities, and there are some imbalances on regional side, and the cities are becoming hegemonic. 56% of the population are living in cities. Only 3% of the distributed area are composed of cities, and 5% of the national income is being produced in cities, and carbon emissions, 76% is being created by the cities, and 75% of the natural resources are being consumed in cities, and the global waste, 50% is being created, is being produced in cities. We were discussing mucilage problem in Marmara Sea. When we look at the surrounding of Marmara Sea, 65% of the import activities are taking place in this region. And we need to take preventive measures and local means in cities. We need to look at the administrative capacity, enhance and empower the service capacity of the municipalities. And we should reconsider and rethink the issue with these parameters in mind. Now, if you only look at Istanbul, 18% of the population is living there, but the Turkish economy is 40% is living in Istanbul. As a result, the lessons that we take from pandemic, of course, needs to make us to think how we are going to empower the service capacity, and how we are going to empower the infrastructure of local governors, and how we are going to become more mobile and agile. And about these shocks and the impact of this shock, of course, we can discuss the issue from different perspectives. This is FAO's food index, 2014 and 2016. After March 2020 to 2020, we see a huge rising trend. And we're all complaining, but everybody is complaining about the food prices after 2020. This is directly related with any type of crisis, storaging, raw material prices. All of a sudden there is an increase, and the logistic costs have increased a lot, and in this supply chain we do have a chain of problems. And in the future, what type of solutions we will provide on goods basis should be thought one by one when we are considering the food system shocks. Of course, when we look at the demand side, supply side shocks, we think that the income value is not changing, but the income value is also changing when we look at the rating. When we look at the recovery and the impact phase, this is the beginning of the impact phase, the beginning of crisis. Everywhere did not affect it and have the impact at the same level. In accommodation, the spending of pools, and also landscape expenditures, and and also the MasterCard's data, and this was carried out for Manhattan. When we reflected on Turkey, it would be very essential to repeat it once more for Turkey on local basis. So it is similar to the outcomes of some indexing studies like deep poverty index, and the most affected areas are the restaurants and F&B services. And there are generally the restaurants at rich areas, but people are living in those areas are living in poorer areas. The food price increase in the last 1 year, which is 33% in the global level, have an impact, negative impact on that poor class of the society. And of course, there is a loss of currency rate in Turkey, so we have multiplied the impact, negative impact on poor class. And some people have lost their job, specifically lost their job, and due to these reasons, we have got additional problems. And this is TÜİK, Turkish Statistic Institute's Income and Living Condition Survey Report survey results, and the richest group with the dark blue line is from 2014 to 2020 is increasing significantly. The gray zone, the light gray zone, is that 10% group, and the second richest group has been shown by red. And between 2019 and 2020, you see the increase in Istanbul. This is from TÜİK and surveys. The grays are not very mobile. They are more actually stabilized. They do have a horizontal movement, and the other one is rising very rapidly. How we can visualize it? I have placed one side here. During the recovery phase, this green transformation and digital transformation are vitally important. But green and digital transformation may create some inequalities, and it may bring some additional shocks, and we should get ready for that. And those preparations, of course, should be considering the local impact. With a very concrete, actually, way of showing that is focusing on Manisa Zonguldak's total distribution of employment, coal mining's distribution among these different sectors. We can see the local impact. We can see that it is very asymmetric. It is very uneven. It is possible to see that in Turkey, the employed people in mining sector is below 1%. However, in Zonguldak, it is 21.6. In Manisa, Soma, it is 46.7. So this means that in Turkey, if we are making any preparation for the recovery phase, and we should do indeed, and Turkey-like economies may not ignore the fact of green and digital transformation. We are a part of European economy, and there is a restructuring phase there, and so we should not be outside this restructuring phase. We should be aware of this fact, and on the other side, we should get ready for this transformation. And during this transformation process, of course, we should be aware of the impacts that it will create. It is possible to state it as follows. Today and the next 20 years calculation shows us a fact. This transformation for the carbon emission side, for the employment and growth side, may create some net positive impacts. What is important for us? I'm an economist. Just like Keynes has told us, from today to tomorrow, which conditions we will live is very important for us. So the next 15-20 years of transformation, preventive measures on the local means by empowering the service capacity can be achieved. So we need to take it into account like that. And a fair discussion on transformation should be focusing on that. And this discussion is directly related with our pandemic lessons. And we are not good in taking lessons about pandemic, when we look at 2019, 1 out of 3% of the employment in the field of industry is the industrial areas. What did these actually organize industrial units, regions, and organized industry regions, OERs, how they were controlling this? The red one is showing that temperature measurement and HAS code entrance is not being done. And when we look at the green ones, they carried out. And the white ones are showing whether they do have any registration at the Providential Health Department or not. And the people who are managing those regions, the pandemic management side should be involved, but as far as we could see from this graph, this is a very minor example, but we can generalize it, and in the local side, we can decide what to do, what to prioritize. Turkey's basic difficulty in green transformation, it is possible to say some difficulties, but at the same time, Turkey is a very centralized, unitary type of state. Our municipalities' capacities needs to be increased. But first of all, what we need to do is we need to have a decentralized reform. And actually, we should know that when we are speaking about empowering the infrastructure of smart cities, we are trying to create a digital skeleton for coordination. However, a more robust infrastructure, local infrastructure is necessary, and a stronger local coordination mechanism is necessary. We have learned it during the pandemic and in the recent fires and floods. And in the following period, we need to get ready for such kind of shocks, and in order to be resilient against such kind of shocks, we should have a local decentralized way of administration style. If you are going to take out some certain outcomes, let me briefly summarize them. In post-COVID recovery phase, we won't have a problem-free time, actually. And if we are designing public policies should not be designed by pre-assuming that everything will be good. We should have the presumption of some certain things may go wrong, and we need to get ready for those wrong things. We know what we are going to do in transformation process. We will be increasing the prices of hydrocarbon, we will make it more expensive, and we are going to look for the individual changes of the consumers. What we need to see is, of course, we are going to have the same asymmetric impacts. There is a high probability there. So decentralized local governance is essential, and we need to think about a mindset which is going to administer with a green mindset, with a digital transformative mindset. Are the cities of Turkey ready for that? The infrastructure, the administrative infrastructure is not ready for this transformation process. I have written a single example here, and in the future, circular economy will be very important, and they call it city mining, steel and also iron sector. Raw material needs 28% and carbon emissions 72% can be reduced by having city mining. And managing this structure with this infrastructure is not very easy to do. How much we are ready as Turkey to this transformation? We need to write what we have learned from pandemic one by one when we are designing the program for the future post-virus economic recovery phase. One of them is the empowering of social protection network, and this is something obvious which we have seen, we have learned. World Bank has got some studies, some researches, and pointing out the fact that the poverty rate is really significantly increasing in Turkey, and the local government reform should be updated. And it is in progress of updating, actually, and his service capacity can only be achieved by having an administrative reform. Let me stop here if you like. You have got 50 seconds left. You don't have to stop, and we can listen to you further. Really, you have pointed out very important facts. It was very effective and very important data. It was really inspiring and really opened our minds. Thank you.
We could have listened to you somewhat longer. Okay.
Third speaker, Professor Myung Kang. He's the professor of urban and regional planning and director of Smart City Research Center at the University of Seoul. He's the editor of International Journal of Urban Sciences, listed in Social Sciences Citation Index and Scopus. He's interested in urban science and the urban and regional planning for smart and sustainable development. He has also work experience in Seoul Metropolitan Government, Boston Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and World Bank. He received PhD and MCP from the Department of Urban Studies and Planning at MIT and Bachelor and MS from the Department of Urban Engineering at Seoul National University. So we are delighted to have you here, Professor Kang, and the floor is yours. If you have a presentation, so you can share the screen.
Okay, thank you for invitation and thank you for having me this precious the meeting. So I actually, can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see it. It's
okay.
But I can half of the screen. Yeah, here it comes. Yeah, yes. No problems. Okay.
Okay, I don't know the Turkish, so I don't understand much about what you presented, but maybe we have quite the same ground. And so today's actually I'm talking about a little more general issue about the economic recovery or resilience issue. And actually I prepared some COVID issue in the Seoul cases, but it's hard to find. Actually, I'm on travel now. I'm in DC. It's 3 a.m. here. Anyway, so I want to just come back, just to recap about economic resilience, because after some shocks, we need to have some the capability to come back. But the economic resilience is a little bit different from like the physics or material science, because in physics, usually the resilience means the resistance do not change, okay, from the exogenous shock, or returning to the previous status. That's the basic ideas in the material sciences. But the economic resilience, there is another aspect, like one is returning as the like a material science, but the other one is reorganization. So we call the previous one is bounce back to the previous stage. This is we call the bounce forward, which means it's not just going back. We are adapt to the new world, new economic situations. So today I'm more focused on the bounce forward, how to make progress, which means better than even today, even after the shock. So how to make it, and what would be the critical factor to make that happen. So okay, this is the conventional ideas of the resilience. The left diagram is to simply bounce back for the previous, somehow the expected growth. So it's coming back before stage. But the right graph is coming from the Martin, actually. and he classified into the 5. So there is more than one types of the resilience. Typically, we assume like going back to previous stage, but maybe just the shock and we just shrink a little bit, but we keep the rate. That's another kind of the bounce backward. But there is another possibility. Okay, after shock, we jump even bigger than before and going forward, or even further beyond. So my question is, okay, this is one part, and I'm more interested in how to make this kind of the situation, even after the shocks. Okay, maybe in this case, the shock is not the good one, but it could be an opportunity to reform ourselves to move forward for the development. So in that sense, I would call it more sustainable development instead of just staying there. And this diagram shows somewhat the total growth back, but I also want to bring some more the qualitative aspect, which means like a more inclusive development, more sustainable development. So we don't want to just come back to the previous stage. We want to make this kind of maybe the bad situation as a good opportunity for the betterment in the future. So, and in this sense, I focused on, let me briefly explain about my study. The recent I completed is like, okay. So this is some ideas. It's a very theoretical, hypothetical ideas. So the ideas borrows from the ecology. So basically the natural science or the evolutionary development, evolutions. So somehow each entity, it could be a biology, it could be a form, a company, or a region, can grow from R to K, which means they just expansionary growth, which means they just grow in size, like growing from baby to the others, kind of the size big. But as they accumulate more and more and size gets bigger, there is a tendency, general tendency of the slowing the innovations. So some point the system is saturated. It has a momentum to dissolve and release all the risk, but all the knowledges, the human factors are there. And the point is, from the omega to alpha is the process of the reorganizations. So we need to shift around the peoples and ideas and make a new thing, new businesses or new forms, so we need both the actions of like a scaling up, and the other one is reorganization. So the second one sounds like a creative destructions, and then if we continue this kind of the process, we may develop further and further for the sustainable development. So out of this process, when I just focused on, I hypothesized that the weak tie would be a very important key factor of the sustainable development, or overcoming the destructive. It's a destructive construction or constructive destruction. So what it means for the adaptive resilience, which means a bounce forward kind of the resilience, is the ability to reorganize the industrial ecosystem, not just return to the state before. And so members of the network, because this I call it the ecosystem, network must undergo the process to obtain new ideas, new information, or new capability to shuffling around and make a new business, new forms. So we need to have new knowledge. So collide new ideas, new information to make a new product or new forms. And you're probably familiar with the weak tie, which means it's a tie. It's not the weak itself, but in terms of the network cases, it's like a loosely coupled the link between firms or the people. So let me explain a little bit about like a simple. So there are various types of regional economic organizations. So for example, one could be like this, like a very concentrated, one dominant players, maybe usually the big company or monopoly and the big powers or the suppliers and parts. And this is a bit hierarchical. Still, it's very centric oriented, but like the last one is showing more horizontal or loosely coupled. And this is still somewhat tight because all the nodes are linked, but loosely coupled is there are some missing nodes and interconnection beyond some clusters. For example, like some links between these two clusters like this, or the links between or across some boundary of industry or boundary of the firms, supply chains. So, but this kind of analysis is not easy yet today because of the data limitations, because it's hard to gather the transaction data between firms or the people. So we compiled all the paper-based data between in this case, I used the automaking industry cases, thousands of companies, the business reports. So, and then this is just the jump to the main analysis. This shows there are 5-6 regions in Korea, so economic regions. And this is the capital region, shows very large groups of people and very closely linked to each other. And you can see some groups, but you can see, there is some measures and indicators, but I just want to show some visualize in terms of some somewhat concentrated ways like this one. But there is another types of we found it's a clustered way, and this is more like this is really like a spread, and there you can see some links beyond the clusters. So you probably know this kind of the analysis then. So let me jump to some findings. So this modularity is one of the measure of like concentration, simply speaking. So clustering, it's how they are clustered each other strongly. And this is resilience. I used the resilience of the employment growth compared to the other region, so average. So resilience is a 1 or greater than 1 is a faster recovery than the national average. Okay, and the modularity, if it's high, means it's very highly concentrated, centralized, and hierarchical. And as you saw, if the modularity is lower, you saw the higher the resilience. So there is a more chance to bump each other or cross the ideas and meet the new people or new businesses, new possibilities. Another measure is skewness. I used the ZIPS rank the theorem, the number. So if this number is high, means there is a dominant players, and if it's low, means it's relatively evenly distributed. It's more like a similar size number of firms is there, and the resilience, the total improvement change shows there is some general tendency about little lower the skewness. This is particularly the time of the economic shock. It's not the overall. I use the 2 times of the resilience. 99 means this time is you probably know the Asian financial crisis in the 1997, 8, 9, that period of time. And the 10 means the global financial crisis from 2008, 9, 10. So that period of time. So in terms of the recovery, from the back into the more employment, that shows some relationship. Yeah, it is a statistically significant relationship between these two the factors. So the conclusion is like adaptive resilience. I think this is one of the characteristics of resilience, and also I would say this is more important today because so-called we are living in the new normal, which is characterized as more shocks and bigger shocks is coming frequently than before. So we have to adjust more and more compared to the previous decades. And so more and more, I would say the G region should have some capability to reorganize themselves and make shift the economy in a new form and new ways, or new product, a new industry and new forms. So, and this kind of the evolutionary development requires reorganization of regional economic resources, organizations, knowledges, and information. So, and this knowledge and information may cross the borders, like maybe some biology ideas goes to semiconductor, whatever, those kind of the hybrid interconnections, or in terms of institution, like the firm and the university, kind of. So for the sustainable development or the adaptive resilience, we also need to pay a lot of attention about the characteristics of network of the regional economy, not just the number or some traditional, the measure is like a GDP number, and that those approach, I would say is there is a missing component is the network characteristics, how they organized, how do they link each other, how to interact each other. So that characteristics is very important, I would say. So, and this is the result of the recovery index shows that the regions with a weak tie means the cross-border loosely coupled, or like crossing the industry or firms and university, and those kind of the ties may help to overcome and make a new to build a new economy, the shock. So, and I did a bit similar, but not quite the same one with the COVID shocks on the retail market in some cases. I'm sorry, I forgot to add the slide here, but it shows so similar so far. It's too early to say because just a couple of years just has the past. But like one district with very dominant players, they get the bigger shock. Like the shock is very big, but the district is composed of like small and medium, so many different like shops. They have a little stronger resistance. We need to study more, but the outcome shows that kind of the difference. So that might be another the part of the story we have to think about the regional economic development or resilience after shocks. Thank you very much.
This is great. Thank you very much, Professor Kang. It is very informative, and I took my notes, several keynotes, several keywords, several ideas. But I would like to thank, first of all, to our three distinguished speakers for their contributions. And I would like to open a debate. My eyes are on my right hand of my monitor, tracking if there are questions and answers from the audience, from the chat box. I can't see any, but I invite all of the presenters can also raise some issues and ask questions to each other. But at the same time, we also value the contributions, questions which will come from the audience. So the floor is open to everybody, basically. But until some questions or notes will be written in the chat box, I would like to say a few words. I think we have already reached a discussion that it is not easy, or it's not going to be that easy to return back to our pre-COVID status. There is a consensus. It seems that there is a consensus on that. And it seems that the word, the new normal, has become very widely used and accepted in every circle, in the society, in the academic circles, in the policy circles. Everybody has started to use the word new normal. So this means that we all have already accepted that we can't go back to the pre-COVID status. So that's for sure. So this is one thing in our pocket. And the second thing is that what we have in the early days of the pandemic or the outbreak, let's say, that the virus seemed to me that to all of us that we thought that it's a very democratic virus. It is affecting mainly the middle-aged group and the older-aged group, but it doesn't make any differentiation in terms of making sick. It doesn't care whether the virus it wasn't very selective in terms of the age, in terms of sex, gender, in terms of income. So it was the virus for everyone. But later on, as the COVID virus has started to mutate within the freedoms of capitalism, let's say, it has mutated. It started to be very selective, and it has started to create some inequalities and asymmetries within the society at different scales, at national scale, at global scale, national scale, regional scale, urban scale, and within the cities, we have been seeing or witnessing that the geography of the disease is very uneven, and those we observe groups have access to vaccine, doesn't have the vaccine, and those are lucky ones like us have the opportunity to work from home in their comfort. In our comfort, and those have to work outside and have to use the public transportation systems and have a direct contact with the virus. So this is the asymmetry, and this is the selectiveness or the discriminating character of the virus. So this is for sure. So this makes us to rethink the COVID crisis as the crisis of capitalism. And we have to, and our speakers, you have already stretched the debate to the resilience concept and whether we're going to be a bounce back or bounce forward type of discussions have emerged. So in the policy circles, I observe that this is an opportunity to build back better. But some of us have already started to say that we have to be more ambitious. Building back better is not enough. So we should search alternatives to build forward better. So in this context, I would like to ask our speakers if they can make any comment that what would our research priorities be and what would our theoretical priorities and theoretical frameworks and our policy alternatives. So I think planning as a discipline has to think more seriously about its methodological, theoretical, and policy-oriented priorities. So any words any ideas that we would like to comment on our priorities in this sense? So it's an open question for everyone, and I'm still scanning the chat box, which is disappointingly empty. So any speaker, any guest speaker would like to comment on our priorities.
Maybe I can say a few words about Professor Kang's.
Sure. We will be delighted to hear.
Let me start from that point.
Okay.
And let me this time speak in English because Professor Kang mentioned that he may not have followed the discussions very closely. So let me say a few words in English then.
Sorry, I should learn Turkish.
No, there was an interpretation option actually.
That should be, yeah.
But anyway.
Okay.
Okay, I like that framework where you talked about bouncing back and bouncing forward, physics and economics comparisons. I like those very much. But I think what we have now at hand, as Yiğit has also mentioned, this time there is no bouncing back because it seems highly likely now that there is not going to be the status quo ante. Because that is changing, and it has started to change with for countries like us, like Turkey. It has started to change in December 2019. First, von der Leyen, the president of the EU, has mentioned about this Green Deal as the jobs and growth agenda of Europe, of the European Union at that time. Then after the election of Biden in the US, a similar framework started to develop over there. And now, then later on in 2021, it started to become like the G7 framework. And then the EU framework has started to move forward in this July. You know, when they announced their Fit for 55 program, it becomes more concrete. And what we are now seeing is not only what the EU is doing, it's not only the border tax for the products that are not compliant with the carbon emission requirements of theirs, but the industry standards are changing also. Regulatory requirements are changing. So everything is on the move. So as far as I see, there is no status quo ante. So that's why it is this time it's going to be very different from the 1997-1999 crisis. You mentioned 1999. It started in 1997, I think. this time it's also different from 2008-2010 crisis in the United States. It started in the financial markets of the United States. This is a different situation because now the status quo is definitely changing. There is no option. If there is no catastrophic development, let me say, there is no going back to the old status quo. There is no bouncing back. There is only this way of opening up, the bouncing forward way is open. So all countries now need to make adjustments regarding that. And then when I look at Turkey, as our president has now announced in the United Nations General Assembly, Turkey is now ratifying finally the Paris Agreement, climate accord. And he also has mentioned that, he mentioned 2053 as the net zero target for Turkey. So now everybody has to make new plans. Turkey needs an emission trading system. Then we need to specify when the coal exit is going to be. There's the need for a date for that. So when you look at the situation now, I think this opens up. Resilience is an issue, but I think administrative capacity is also another issue, which becomes very much important, not only at the macro level, but at the micro level too, and at the local level too at the same time. So whether you have administrative capacity to make plans, let's say, for bouncing forward, I think is going to become more important than it was in the case of the previous crisis. That's what I understood. That's what I got from your presentation. And I think that's very much valuable for us to think about the Turkish situation. But regarding it, what are the priorities? I think developing capacity at the local level in Turkey is a very important issue. When we are talking about smart cities, when we are talking about that backbone for coordination, making decisions, etc., that requires a certain level of administrative capacity at the local level too. I think that's where Turkey is lacking, because as I have tried to note, we are a different kind of a unitary state. Sweden is also a unitary state. Turkey is also a unitary state. I don't know the numbers very well, but let me just give you the idea. When you look at Sweden, 70-75% of public sector employees are employed by local governments, by the local administrations. But in the case of Turkey, when you look at the total public sector employees, 70 or 75% of them, even the local ones, are employed by the central government. So that creates problems for coordination, for administrative capacity. In the Turkish case, I don't know the situation in Korea, but this is a very centralized. We have a very centralized organizational structure, and I think this period requires more flexibility at the local level, as far as I see. When you look at the challenges, that's my main message for today. So let me stop here. But thank you for the presentation, Professor Khan.
Thank you very much, Professor Sak. Great comments.
May I add on the Professor Sak's comment? Yeah, I totally agree about a couple of comments he made about there is no option. Somebody may imagine we may be able to come back to the previous stage, but unfortunately, there is no such things anymore. Although I present in an academic way, which means there is two possibilities theoretically, but in the real world, actually there is no way except the moving forward. We have to make a new way of the economy or system. So it's better just put more focus on how to build the new one instead of just saying or like dreaming about like all day. So that's the right approach. But it is very hard, and in many ways, like because moving forward means destructuring and reorganizing, as it involves some change, big or small, and probably somewhat big, and then it's the shake the ground of the established group in a society. So establish the big companies, establish some politicians and whatever. But it's very hard to make in a social aspect to make such kind of the change. So the first thing I say is we have to somehow accept this is the only way. Otherwise, if you want to try to just to keep the current status, then means we'll move backward. There's no options. So we have to accept the situation, and we have to put more effort, and then we have to build some social agreement or some kind of the consensus or acceptance about the change. But it's far easier than done, I say. So, and the second hardest part is like when we make a change, there is well adaptive people versus less adaptive people, which means like I'd say, for example, like there are some people can run fast, or someone cannot run fast enough. By naturally, it's the same thing. Like in terms of technological change or whatever the change, someone has more capability, and relatively some groups of people has relatively less capability. So if we just roll out such kind of a change, especially big change, then it leads to some divide. Like naturally this kind of the change leads to like a skill biased change, which means higher skill people can get a better opportunity, but less skilled the people or less educated, less somehow, and then they have little chance, and they may fall out further and further, fall behind. So the second point is how to make all the people get the benefit like from this kind of change. This is another big task and challenge, and there are various ways to approach address the problem. But one key critical the factors we have to do is, as Professor Sak mentioned, more the decentralization of the decision making and resource making or reorganization. Because I think the Turkey is quite a big country in terms of geography and in many ways. So it's hard to organize in a one center of the country to control everything. So because each part of the country and each part of the society has very different background, history, and diversity over there. So it's another the hardest part, though. So that kind of the more independent but collaborative kind of the structure is also I would say it's inevitable. Otherwise, it's like in the business cases, like in Korea, and some of big company just close down, and then the region it's just collapsed because of the big company is gone. But there are some regions with the small and medium companies and good capability, and they tend to survive somehow by reorganizing themselves in a different way to meet the new demand. So it's a little bit similar in the social organizations managing the social. So I think the Professor, I totally agree about the Zach's comments and approach is very important and inevitable, I would say.
Thank you very much. We have 10 minutes.
Ben de ufak bir katkıda bulunmak istiyorum Yiğit Bey, izninizle.
Tabii, buyurun.
I would like to contribute a little. As you have just mentioned, yes, it is not possible to go back to the previous time of COVID-19, actually, past times, and we don't have to. We are at the threshold of a crisis situation, and we can transform it into an opportunity. Güven Bey mentioned it. In human development, for the very first time after 20 years, we are having a going back trend, and how we can just revert it back. We are seeking for a solution. And at this point, COVID's long-term impacts, of course, needs to be reduced. And for the recovery activities, we are giving support. And we need to focus on different aspects. Two speakers have mentioned those points, and I would like to underline those facts. And we should look beyond the recovery phase. And on the other side, our administrative mechanisms should be empowered. Local governments, of course, at this point should be emphasized, and social protection. You have just mentioned COVID-19 has had an impact among all of us, but there are some more vulnerable groups. And of course, we need to have social policies to protect them, and we need to transform our social protection policies. Green economy is our agenda, and digital disruptive technologies are not being opportunities for all of us, and they are not equal. Administrative, social protection, green economy, and digital transformation should go beyond the recovery phase, and these topics should have priorities in our agendas. And climate crisis may also be mentioned. And now we are passing through COVID-19, but climate crisis is at our door. And just like COVID-19, it's a systematic type of shock. It is affecting the whole system. Economical, environmental, and social impacts are present. And these impacts in unemployment and vulnerability issues are rising from the same side. And there is an unsustainable system, and climate crisis is the result of an unsustainable system. When we are speaking about SDG and all the attempts up until now, of course, are having an impact. The positive gains are having an impact due to climate crisis present situation. We are having the preliminary watching of the climate crisis with COVID-19. This is what I think, and the real show will be approaching soon. We need to change our daily practices. We need to change our daily habits. With COVID-19, we have started to discuss our present conditions, consumption habits, and somehow it has affected. And with our consumption habits, we are doing harm to the biological diversity. We are polluting the world and doing bad to the nature. With COVID-19 crisis, we should combine the climate crisis, because when we look at the impacts and outcomes, they are very similar in nature. And those two crises, when we take them together and melt them in a melting pot, we can look beyond the recovery phase, and we should work on that, focus on the post-phase, post-COVID phase. Thank you very much for everyone's contributions. We would like to thank you, Seher Hanım, for your contribution.
Minutes, and we have two questions in the chat box, so I would like to read them. I don't know whether we can have time to have an opportunity to answer both of them, but there's a question to Mr. Professor Kang. You have indicated in the conclusion that regions with less linkage have been more resilient. However, is weak linkages not a factor of weakness at the same time? And there's another question, the second question to Professor Sak. How does the EU approach the transformation process based on green and particularly localization dimensions that you have rightly advocated? And how can we make stronger voice for the role of local governments based on the needs of bouncing forward? So the first question was directed to Professor Kang. If he can address within a few minutes, we will be delighted to hear your answer.
Okay, if I understand correct, about the weak tie, it's not literally the weak. It's a terminology from the Granovetter. He's another sociologist looking. It's found as a good way of the social relationship. So the strong tie usually means like a blood, the relatives and family, or maybe the same school, probably kind of same department, kind of very long, strong relationship. The issue with that the kind of the strong tie is the information is in most cases redundant, which means everybody knows the same information within that cluster because under the same professor probably or within the family. But the weak tie is not the weak. It's I'd say it's more loosely coupled. Mean you meet somebody in the a hobby club, so there is no interaction. But somehow you meet some people in the soccer club or in some coincidence with new friends, new people in this kind of the conference. Probably one of the kind I meet the professor. This is the first time, but we may develop some ideas over the time. But so this kind of the new opportunity to meet each other, because we like a professor or the Sahar. I'm sorry for pronunciation. So yeah, we didn't have any kind of same school, same family, or same region, but some ideas each other, and maybe the professor and the Sahar may have a little different ideas, but they can borrow some ideas from me. They took it and use the ideas into more social divide issues or gender issues, equality issues. So it's the knowledge is adding on and prosper, and the new ideas comes. That's the process of the innovation. So they get some inspirations and ideas from each other. So in the weak tie, I mean it's some links beyond their inside the cluster. So the relationship is not only limited in the internal focus or internal concentration. They also have some relationship with other industry or the parts. So that makes the more possibility of the innovation. So, but when we talk about a specialization or economic development, there is some conventional tendency of focusing one industry or one group of people, one kind of put a lot of effort in one section kind of. Yeah, that would be a part of the story, but that's not the whole story, especially for the sustainable long-term development. So we have to balance, or nowadays we need to put more consideration to build up such kind of the bigger the network system of ecosystem. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have 1.5 minutes. That means 90 seconds. I'm not sure whether Güven Bey can respond within a very short, limited time.
Sure. I think I have already responded. I believe that the Green Deal now is the bouncing forward way for the Turkish economy. It's good that there is a framework that we already have close ties with the European economy. We already have close ties with the Western markets. So that provides us a kind of a blueprint for the things that needs to be done in the near future in the Turkish economy, which is good because, currently we don't have a strong economic program. Now that gives us an opportunity, if 2053 is the objective, to prepare a strong economic program, I think, which is good.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Just in time. So I think it has been a very fruitful debate. We started with capitalism's crisis, then we jumped on the climate crisis, resilience debate, Granovata even. So I want to thank all of the presenters for their valuable contributions and hopefully see you face to face in some conference and elsewhere. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Teşekkür ediyoruz.
Bye.
İyi pazarlar.